your co-host Dan Blewett. I'm here with Bobby Stevens, remotely from the snowy tundra that is Chicago. Bob, how you doing?
It's freezing here. I'm doing good.
Man, and we have an awesome guest today. We are joined here remotely also from Arizona, Chris Carminucci, scout from the Arizona Dbacks. Chris, thanks for joining us.
Good morning, guys. Good to be here.
Good morning. So you're not on Mountain Time. You are on Pacific Time.
Yeah, it would be nice to know what time zone I'm on, but it changes here in Arizona sometimes, and we figured it out.
Well, we were talking off camera about the daylight savings, and I'm super jealous that you guys don't have to do this nonsense of having like zero sunlight in the evening all year. You guys get to just one time zone. That's amazing.
Yeah, I will never complain about Arizona in general. Being an East Coast guy for most of my life, and having it get dark at 4 o'clock in the afternoon was never fun. So I'm good here.
Yeah, and so where did you grow up, Chris?
I grew up in Westchester County, New York, which is about 50 minutes outside of Manhattan, and played at John Jay High School there in Cross River, New York. And I was one of these people that, while I love going back to visit Manhattan and get some really good food, other than that, I don't go back to New York a whole lot, so other than to visit family as well. So it was good to get out and get some good weather. As players, we all want to be in the best weather possible to be able to have our bodies feel good. And for me, it was going down south to Georgia and going to college.
Yeah, and so as a scout for the D-backs, it probably just makes sense that your home base is near your spring training facilities and all that stuff.
Absolutely. With having 3 kids and a wife and having to travel as much as I still do, it's nice to be able to get many more days in my own bed at home.
Yeah. Do you consider all the scorpions that like live in your shoes? Do you consider them part of your family?
What's funny about it? I've never seen a scorpion. Okay. I've never,
what? No way.
We live really close to our complex, and we're kind of in a family, or I should say a more urban setting here. And so, I've seen 2 snakes, and that was while I was hiking, but never a scorpion.
That's baffling. I thought they're like ants essentially out there. They're just like everywhere.
Apparently they are, but I'm scared to death of seeing one, so I'm glad I haven't.
Oh man. Well, at least you got the snakes in. I mean, what other stuff is down there? There's obviously cacti, which do you prefer the word cacti, or can we just change it to cactuses? Where do you fall on this issue? This is an important issue.
We talk about it all the time. When I say cacti to my daughters, they yell at me. They say, "What is that?" And I'm like, "It's a cactus," and we say cactus for sure. Yes.
Okay. Because some of those words where we have to pluralize them, like it just feels forced and awkward. And I don't want to ever say cacti. I want to say cactuses. Let's just say, look at all those cool cactuses and we're good. That's Arizona in a nutshell. But
I'm with you, man. Right there with you.
So for those of you listening, Chris is also an author. I'm actually reading his book on Kindle now. It's let me pull it up. It's all about independent league baseball, which is Chris was a independent league scout for a long time. You still do a little bit of that, but you're kind of transitioning now in your scouting career. And it's called Sign Me. So tell us a little bit about your book.
Well, I kind of wrote it out of frustration because I kind of got sick and tired of not enough people giving the independent leagues its just due. I would get calls every year from college coaches. And by the way, before I forget, I see you had Eddie Blankmeyer on a few weeks ago, and Eddie, I worked for Eddie at St. John's. I was
2004, right?
Yep, I was his coach there, and loved every minute. Eddie's one of the greatest human beings alive, as far as I'm considered. But I started talking to more and more college coaches, and they just didn't know enough about independent league baseball to be able to give their undrafted players any advice. And, to the point where some colleges were like, oh, don't go play independent baseball. I don't know if that's the right, vehicle to be able to get to where you want. And I think that is the stupidest thing that I've ever heard in my life, because I am a huge, huge fan of what independent league baseball can bring to the table in general, just from a playing standpoint and experience standpoint, but not only as a vehicle to be able to get you to the big leagues. And I started just writing it, and I said, hopefully this is going to help educate some players, some college coaches, some, just even youth league coaches, to know that there's other options if you do not get drafted. There's other ways to get to the big leagues, or even to get to pro ball, other than the normal, route and stream. So, I wrote it and it ended up being a pretty big hit, and I was blessed that it ended up being as popular as it was, because I really poured my heart and soul into it, and some of it was a little in your face to people that didn't because to be blunt, it pissed me off that they weren't giving it its just due. It is a great form of baseball. It is a great way to be able to get your feet wet in pro ball, no matter if you're a released player from a major league organization or you're an undrafted college free agent. And I wanted people to know more about it.
Yeah. So let's back up a little bit, because I mean, obviously this is something I'm passionate about as a career indie lifer who has that chip on his shoulder, because people, when you say like, hey, I was a pro player, but I was an independent league player, people think that you're just, you played in like the dumpster league. And
They say semi-pro.
There's
semi-pro all the time.
Well, that's also an interesting conversation, maybe for later, the philosophy of what professional is. But Chris, can you define independent baseball for people that don't know?
Independent baseball in a nutshell is a form of professional baseball that is not owned or operated by Major League Baseball. It has independent owners. These players are purchased by the major league teams like the Diamondbacks, and put into our system when we either have a need, or in our case, we look for when we have a need, but also for when we find a player that's better than what we currently have. We're always looking to upgrade. And a lot of times, yes, there are better players in independent leagues to be able to pop into our system that are better than what we currently have. And, I always get asked, what the level of independent league baseball is in general. And I think you guys, know better than anybody that it's whoever's on the mound that night. It could really dictates that level. It could be AAA. It could be rookie league, depending on where you are. It just depends on who that pitcher is and, how much experience in general those players have. I mean, I've seen Frontier League games that are every bit as good as AA, AAA. I've also seen American Association same way, and Atlantic League obviously same way. But I've also seen it on a night where it's much lower than that. So you just have to, when you're scouting, you just have to be open-minded. And I think that's what, just to get back to the book for a minute, I think that was one of the things in the book that I was trying to get across. Guys, just be open-minded about it. Utilize this. It's there. It's fantastic. Stop judging it, and let's get to work on utilizing it.
Yeah, it's hard.
Go ahead, Bob.
I was just say it's hard to explain to people when they ask you like, oh, what is that? It's like, because Dan and I both play in the Atlantic League, and then I help out American Association team in Chicago, and that's Frontier League. American Association is Midwest. That's a lot of Midwest people. Some of those teams. And it's hard to how do you explain to these guys like, look, it's good baseball. It's not semi-pro men's league. Like, we play every day. You get paid. Some of these guys will get picked up to affiliated ball. It's not what you think that, the guy you played in high school with is doing on Sunday mornings at his local high school.
And, these jobs for coaches and even players are coming, even more highly sought. And I'll say this, I get asked by, AAA managers all the time across any organization, hey, I'd like to go into the independent leagues and manage or coach. And, that's first of all, it's hard to get your foot in the door if you've never done it before. People don't realize that. Second of all, they want to be able to finally make out their own lineups. It's not necessarily only about development. It's about winning, which, I believe in winning as a vehicle to develop. And,
Absolutely.
I've had so many players that I've signed over the years that said, I got released out of an organization. I went to independent ball and I found myself. I learned how to win. I learned how to be able to be a better teammate. I fixed some of the warts I had on me, from before. And, we've all had warts as younger players and all that. And independent league exposes it. And, there's nobody's better than the other person. You got to get out there and you got to, improve on it and try to get out like everybody else wants to.
Yeah, I mean, speaking to the level part, when I was in spring training with Somerset, the Somerset Patriots are in the Atlantic League, which is like the highest independent league. And that whole lineup, like, I kind of knew in spring training, like, I don't stack up super well here, because it was like big leaguer, AAA, AAA. And so, like you said, it really forces you to sink or swim. And, you can potentially make that team. But there was a moment in that spring training where I was in line to throw my bullpen, and I was watching like 2 former big leaguers and a bunch of AAA guys go in front of me, and watched how they threw their bullpens. And I was like, I've never thrown a bullpen like that. And I immediately was like, I have to throw a bullpen like that right now.
Yep.
And it forced me mentally. I was like, and what it was is, as a kid, you hear your whole life, oh, be down the zone, be down the zone. I always succeeded up in the zone. And that was something that I found out about myself as a player. But at the same time, when you're showcasing yourself, as was the case there, like every one of these guys, they were just destroying right below the kneecap in the strike zone. Just like they were never up in the zone, the bullpen, because they had command that I didn't have. And I'm like, I have to be able to do that right now. I'm going to be cut. And so you get into that mentality where it's like, oh, it's not like I'm in college and I'll get them next year. It's like, I got to do this now. And to your point about winning is development, I threw one of the best bullpens of my life right there because I had to. And I was like so mentally focused on this ball has to go to the kneecap. And the next pitch has to go to the kneecap. And the next curveball has to go to the kneecap. Or I'm going to expose myself as not good enough to play here. And that's where, I think, and I'd like to hear your opinion about this, but a lot of kids are training today. They think they're being pitchers training, just like throwing balls into nets and all this. And that has their place at some points. But if you don't get out on the mound and find yourself in situations like that, either where you have to win an actual game or do something like that, then you don't get that, like, I'm transforming as a player. I mean, how do you find young players are training today? Do you feel like they're missing some of that component?
Well, you get absolutely, to answer your question, and you get a lot of showcase players now, guys that don't know how to carry that pitchability or that ability to hit a curveball or stay back on a changeup in a game. They know how to do it in a showcase format. But I think that's one of the things, and I was just talking on a podcast yesterday about this. There is no substitute for game play. And obviously what we're going through right now and, what Major League Baseball is going to look like and what minor league baseball is going to look like moving forward, I'm a little concerned about our inability to throw players into game situations because that's how they get better. And to your point, they get better by seeing other more experienced guys also do it and then trying to apply that, and, when I look at what we're going to be doing going forward and if it's complex baseball or what have you, I want to see what these guys can also do when there's screaming fans in their ear. We've all been there. My knees were knocking the first time I hit in front of, it was probably 300 people. But, now it's a little bit of a different formula when you're looking at a player and he's not in the pressure or in the spotlight. You got to play to get better. And, we as much playing as we can give these guys, the better.
Yeah. That's a really good point, Chris. And the thing I always tell people about independent ball when they ask me about, you play affiliated, you play independent, I said independent ball was probably the first time in professional baseball I ever felt like I could utilize like a lot of my strengths as a baseball player and as a winning baseball player, because it was the first time in pro ball that I felt you played to win the game, as opposed to playing to, further your development, or you need it. Like, not that affiliated ball isn't, you're not trying to win, you're trying to win. We're all trying to win, but it was the first time it felt like a team oriented like goal, as opposed to being in, A ball and everybody's trying individually to get to AA, and it's rightfully so. Like, that's how you get to where you want to go, and then you go to independent ball and it's, look, we need guys to make it, like, we're building a roster to win a championship. It's, if you get signed out of independent ball, it's a bonus for the organization that you were with. And it was just a different mindset altogether going into the season.
Yeah. Chris, I want to shift gears a little bit because there's some news on the independent circuit, which I'm sure you heard, which is that Sugarland and St. Paul are potentially going to become affiliated teams. Did you hear that?
Yes, I have. Yeah. I've been following it closely, and, I've talked with the commissioner's office a few times, and just, things are realigning and things are fluid right now, and I think this whole idea that there's going to be less affiliated teams only feeds into the fact that independent baseball is going to become more and more important, and, quite frankly, I mentioned it to you before, with Cash Beecham, who is our independent league scout, who is so important to us because he's the guy on the ground going to see all these guys, feeding us information. And then once we decide we like a player, I'll go in and see him, kind of cross-check it, or we'll just sign him. But it becomes more and more important to be able to have our feet on the ground, have our boots on the ground, and be seeing all these teams, because it's really going to change. I mean, you're not going to have 40 rounds anymore going forward. You're going to have a lot less. And, we're going to have to be able to utilize these independent leagues. And let's face it, as you guys know, independent baseball is a lot about the relationships with the teams and the managers and the scouts and the affiliated front office. That's how things get done. So those relationships are going to need to be fostered more. And I'm going to say this, right now, and I say it publicly every chance I get. Any major league team that does not at least take a look and scout the independent leagues and, give them their due, they're idiots. Okay. They're absolute idiots. And I have heard all the time, different teams, we're not going to bother with that. We're not going to do that, and thankfully it's not a lot of teams anymore, but those few teams that don't go and look at those players, they're going to be left in the dust. And I can't wait to, be the voice in the background when I see my friends on these other teams say, see, you guys lost out because you're not there, and you've got to get your boots on the ground, and you've got to be able to identify talent because it's there. You're just being lazy and not utilizing it.
Yeah, we'll speak on that a little bit. So there's been a lot of guys that have made it either back to the big leagues, like Scott Kazmir was a great example, but also who are some of the guys that you found? Because I know the Dbacks had some success, and that was, in large part because of you. But tell me some of the guys that had their big league story because of independent ball.
Well, the most notable one is David Peralta. Okay, I signed David back in 2013 in the American Association, and he was playing for Bobby Brown. And we needed a kind of an interesting story. We were looking to fill some roster spots, and I had some other guys in mind, but I got a call from David, who said, this was about 2 weeks before the start of the American Association season, and he said, "Hey, I'm really looking to sign. I have a desire to get." He was a left-handed pitcher when he started out with the St. Louis Cardinals, got hurt and got released. He said, "I'm really looking to get back in, but I'm a hitter now." And he seemed like a really good, well-spoken guy. Mm-hmm. And I said, "Where do you live?" And he said, "I live in Florida." I said, "Well, shoot, I'm going to be in Florida anyway. Why don't I work you out?" And I happened to be going down there for Nick Belmonte's workout that he does every year down there. And I was going to scout that event. So I went down, and lo and behold, I work out David, and I love him. A left-handed, pretty swing, super human being. Makeup becomes really, really important when it comes to a guy coming out of independent baseball, because most of the time you're throwing him into the fire. You got to make sure that you've got a good human being. And David was an 80 human being, so I know there was no issues with that. The issue was that as soon as I really liked him, we didn't have that spot left anymore. Somebody came off the DL, and we didn't have a spot anymore. So I said, "Hey, David, go start the season in independent baseball. Stay in touch with me. And, hopefully sometime soon we'll be able to sign you and bring you in." And, one of the things we don't do is we don't sign a player and not give him a fair opportunity. People may say, "Well, why didn't you just sign him and stick him somewhere?" For me, I'd rather see him go to independent baseball and play every day. I don't want to sign a guy and then have him sit around and get stagnant. And that ruins that. First of all, that destroys a player's psyche. And I'm not about that. I'm about getting him in, getting him going, and giving him a fair shake. So anyway, so I said, "David, go back, play, but stay in touch with me." And David literally called me like every other day. "Hey, you got that spot open yet? You got that spot open yet?" He texted me and all that stuff. He was just so hungry. Well, lo and behold, spot opens up. We send him to Visalia, high A ball. He's 23 years old, and he tears it up. The rest of the season, he tears it up. The next year, he comes back. He goes to Double A. My boss at the time, Tony La Russa, happened to be in Mobile, our Double A team, and saw him and goes, "Wow, this guy can really swing it. Such a pretty left-handed swing. Let's really keep our eye on this guy." Well, the next day, AJ Pollock goes down with a wrist injury for the rest of the season, and Tony goes, "Well, we're going to bring up David Peralta." Well, that was 8 years ago. David came up, hits 30 home runs in the big leagues. Just signed a new 3-year, $27 million deal. And we have one of the best left fielders in baseball that came out of the independent leagues. We signed him for $3,000, and here we have a guy that people would have died to have as a first-round draft pick. Yeah. And so stories like that. We also have Ildemaro Vargas on our Major League roster, who I signed out of the Atlantic League. He was in Bridgeport, and back when Bridgeport had a team. Really
sticking it out if you're in Bridgeport. He's hungry if you're in Bridgeport.
Hey, by the way, when I was signing him, I was in the locker room, and it was raining. And we're sitting there. Ricky Van Asselberg at the time was the manager. It was literally raining in the locker room. It was raining outside, and there was, there was holes in the roof and everything else. And here I am, telling El Demaro that we're signing him and setting him to A-ball, and now he's a big part of our major league roster. So we have two guys who are big contributors on our major league roster that came right out of independent league baseball. And it's such a huge thing. And it's a kudos for independent league baseball in general, that, it shows other teams that they're there, and that this is the way to do it. You find a player that's better than what you have, you sign them. If you don't, you're doing yourself an injustice and the player an injustice.
Yeah. Yeah. So one thing that I think is a common, I guess it's not a knock, but I think a lot of players in independent baseball seem to lack a tool, like a key tool that prevents them from either getting back into any ball or that was exposed in affiliated ball when they were originally drafted. Like I had a teammate who we went to some tryouts together before I ended up getting a chance. He never did. He hit like 20 doubles in college. He was very fast for being like a 6 foot, 215 pound, like well-built guy. But he didn't have the arm strength. So he could only basically play first, but he didn't really have like first baseman kind of pop. So when you looked at him, he was an example of a guy who didn't really have a position. He wasn't like a middle infielder. He was like a first baseman, but didn't quite fit at first base. So can you speak on the tools and how, because this comes into D1 recruiting. I was talking with another friend who was talking about a really good D1 hitter, a guy who's tearing it up. He was tearing it up at the Division I level, but this guy also just like can't play the field, just can't at that level. How important is that? And obviously, like when you find a guy who just like doesn't have a position, does he have a chance to keep going?
It's tough, especially, with a guy that doesn't have a position, us being a National League team, so it's hard for me to take a chance on a guy that doesn't have a true position. But, again, if we'll try it, we'll try to sign a guy, and we've done this before, that and experiment with him at different positions. Back to, David Peralta was not a very good outfielder when we first signed him, but he developed into one in time. So we look for guys that are coachable, that are teachable, that can, and let's face it, we're always looking for athleticism, and athleticism above it all, it can make up for a lot of warts. Okay. The big thing that I find with the independent league players that don't make it is the tool they lack is instincts, the feel for the game, the ability to make quick in-game adjustments. Those are the guys that typically don't get out. And you see them all the time. You'll see them at a tryout. You're like, wow, this guy's, built like Tarzan. He runs so well. He's got everything, tool wise, but it just doesn't equate out in a game. And unfortunately, you see that quite a bit. And, those are the guys that burn you a lot of times, because they generally don't develop instincts in time. You can teach a guy, and you can't teach a guy how to run either, but you can teach a guy that's athletic with instincts how to really play this game. But if they're lacking those things, it's very hard, very hard.
Yeah. Do you see it more? And I felt like I saw it with the guys that we played with. You see guys that always have a story, right? Like there's a reason that they end up in independent ball for, whatever. But at the end of the day, if you're an independent ball and you're performing, I think that sticks out as much as anything. Tools. There's guys that I can remember being on a team with Jim Hoey, and if you remember Jim from the Twins days, he's throwing upwards of 100. At any point, like everybody's got something there at that level that, especially if they played in affiliated ball, somebody saw a tool there. But in independent ball, you kind of get the benefit of, if you're performing well, you have a chance, because that's, you're proving yourself on a large stage, on a very talented stage. How much is it when you're looking at these guys? Is it the performance? Or is it all performance? Is it some performance, some tools? What are you specifically looking at when you're at an indie game?
It's tools, performance, and stats. I joke around because some players will be like, do stats matter? I'm like, hell yeah, they matter.
Yeah. It means you're good at baseball. Yeah,
absolutely. It's how we're judged, so, you've got to look at those three components. And, now sometimes you'll take a chance on a player maybe that didn't have the best statistical year. And, one of the things we do a lot of is we look into the players from a statistical standpoint as much as possible. And we have a great just saber staff that really breaks players down and, helps us as scouts out a lot and says, hey, this is the reason why, he was getting hit, when he throws 100, or this is the reason why he doesn't have a good secondary pitch or what have you. So, to answer your question, we try to break it down, but, when we are scouting a player, again, we're normally putting him on a pedestal of where he can help us perform. So, for instance, David Peralta, when we signed him, we knew at that point he could at the very least help our high A club. Okay.
Gotcha.
At the very least, because we want to win championships at our lower levels as well, too. We're an organization that believes that, it is development, yes, but we also want to teach these guys how to put a ring on their damn fingers at the end of the year. It's just nothing like that, as we all know. There is nothing cooler than winning at the end of the year and developing them while that's happening.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things players seem to lack these days is like they don't know how to win. And like you said, when the game starts to really get heavy at the end, how do they compete and show what they can do? Like pull out, a rally in the 8th or 9th off their closer. I mean, that's, like you said, that's something that you probably can't really teach, right?
It's tough. It's tough to teach it, but I'll also say this, is that I think when a player goes to independent baseball, especially a hitter, now that has to go out there, and some of these independent league bullpens that they're rolling out right now, I mean, I'll see video that Cash will send me, and, Sioux City will have, 3 guys rolled out in the 7th, 8th, and 9th that are all blowing 95, 98, and you're like, wow, you talk about now as a hitter, you've got to be able to, perform against that late in the game. You talk about realistic, man. That's something that they're not facing some, 85, 88 guy, that's, going to be bagging groceries in a week. They're facing a guy that's a legitimate, upper level pitcher. So, again, I can't speak enough on how good the independent leagues have become over the years. And again, everybody has warts, everybody has things they have to work on, but the level of play is so much better just in general because the players themselves get themselves in much better shape. I mean, I played independent baseball back in 1996. I wouldn't have had a chance to play these days. These guys are so good, and they're as you guys know, and they're so, they take it so seriously that they're giving themselves most of the time every opportunity to get out.
Yeah. So one of the things we chatted about in a previous episode was you see a lot of these guys tweeting themselves out and being a good advocate for themselves, whether it's on Twitter, like on the Flat Ground app, which is awesome, or, they're just hounding scouts. But a lot of times we see like, okay, here's a guy who's 94 to 97 from the left side and he's a free agent. Like, what's going on with you? And then you look him up and he's got like a 9 ERA from last year. And then you start to wonder, okay, like you said, we all have warts, we all have stuff we need to work on, but like, I feel like a lot of players aren't looking at themselves in the eye and saying, I throw 94 to 97. Maybe I need to shut down the way to ball stuff and actually try to be a better pitcher. I mean, do you feel like there's a trend? Do you see a lot of guys that just have that where they have the raw ability, but they're just like, look, you're 26 and you can't get guys out?
You get a lot of delusional players in this game, and while I'm totally honest with a player, I always tell them if it's still in your heart, you could still go do it, keep going. But at the same time is you'll get a player that will call me and they'll say, hey, listen, I throw 100, but he neglects to mention that, he throws 100 at the top of the zone and, has no secondary options, and so I try to and sometimes I'm a little in their face with them, but I try to do it in a respectful way as well too, that, listen, this is why you're here. Unless you fix the issue, you're going to stay here. So you've got to try something different. And, if you're 25, 26, 27, 28, that window is closing in a hurry. So you've got to make that transition and make that change sooner than later, or you're just going to stay where you are. And, again, some guys get it. Most guys don't get it, okay, to be honest with you. But the guys that do get it either go on to have longer, solid independent careers or affiliated careers. But when the others that really get it, they get to the big leagues. I mean, they do. And in this day and age, with Twitter and all that stuff, I'm constantly on Twitter just seeing who's doing what, who's putting themselves out there. I go to Driveline a few times a year to see guys throw because I love to see a guy recreate themselves. And, players do change. They do. Okay. it doesn't happen often enough, and it doesn't, always happen to the guys you want it to happen to. But you got to keep an open mind, and that's I have arguments with friends of mine that are scouts all the time that are like, hey, I saw this guy on Twitter, and what's he doing? Hey, I'm all for a player out there, selling himself. Listen, if you're not going to sell yourself and say, hey, listen, I want a shot, who is? Your agent, certainly in independent ball, is not going to be out there, always, advocating for you. They've got, other players they're trying to get, who are in organizations already in the big leagues. So you've got to do it yourself. Get yourself out there. What's the worst thing that can happen? Is somebody's going to say, oh, that's, he's self-promoting himself. I'm all for guys self-promoting themselves. So I look at Twitter. I go to any workout I can. I love going to scout the Mexican League as well too in the winter, because you see a lot of guys that will go down there and they'll immediately say, I'm going to work on something in this forum, because listen, if I don't pitch well, they're going to send me home anyway. It doesn't matter. So I'm going to try to work on a changeup. I'm going to try to mix in a splitter. And, a lot of times they end up reinventing themselves down there. And you can, it's an exciting thing to see a player click and finally get it. I love that. To see a player after, 8 years in professional baseball say, you know what, I finally learned how to spin a curveball. It took me this long, but now I've got it. So I look for that stuff.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more about you mentioned the window, and I don't think people understand that, you go to like where I help out at the Chicago Dogs, there's guys on the team that people, I have parents, fans asking me that I know personally, they're like, man, why is this guy, why isn't he with whoever, the White Sox, or why isn't he with the team he got drafted by? And I said, I'm like, you're not understanding like the level, like the benchmarks you want to hit, as a prospect, quote unquote prospect. And I go, some of these guys are stuck behind guys. I go, some of these guys are just, this guy's 30. Like he's not somebody that is on the up. He's on the down. Like you don't understand where some of these guys fit. And, their past resume will kind of dictate where they end up going if somebody wants to take a chance on them.
Well, last year, the numbers show you that roughly the age that a player gets to the big leagues and stays there is, 23 and a half, 24. Okay. You look at that age, okay, and you take a look at, say, the Frontier League or American Association, and you've got a player that's 27, 28, they're 4 or 5 years older than where the player is that's in the big leagues now. So they've got to be that much more ready and honed to be able to jump right in and do those things. It's hard to tell a player at 26, 27, 28 that we're going to give you a lot of time to get ready. We're going to develop you. No, you've got to be ready so we can plug you in.
Yeah.
And, what people don't realize is the best way to get at an organization is to plug a need. Okay. Because there's a specific need that we have that we need to put you in. Okay. And, we've done that a lot. Hey, listen, we've signed guys from, take the American Association. And we'll say, hey, we know that you've played in Double-A already, but we have a spot in High A. Go there, tear it up, and let's see where this thing goes. And, inevitably, a lot of times they'll go there, they'll tear it up, and the next year they're in Double-A or Triple-A. So, players have to be open-minded. They have to understand that and sometimes, they have to understand that they're this is a poor choice of words on my end, but a little bit of a second-class citizen when they first go in there. And they have to prove themselves, and they have to be twice as good to get half as much as the guy who's already there.
Don't worry. We definitely always did feel like second-class citizens. Don't worry.
And let me say this. I have worked in the big leagues a long time, okay? And I've done a lot of things, and I still feel like a second-class citizen, and I love it, okay? Because I love the fact that I go in, that I came from a different spot than a lot of these other guys who were working our front office and other places came from. I enjoy that. You know what I mean? Listen, at heart, I am part of the island of the misfits. Okay. I just get to have a little bit of a voice in a major league organization to be able to fight for all those guys that are on the island with me. Okay. I'm a damn misfit myself, and I always will be. So, I'm always advocating for our class of people, so.
Yeah. So one of my questions is, when you sign one of these guys, what is that process like? Because people, I don't think, have any idea of the inner working. So obviously there's a financial transaction, like the big league club buys, my contract, and now I'm over there. So what does that little process look like? Because you probably are, I'm sure you're aware of Isaac Hess. He was on our show a couple of weeks ago. Isaac got, team said, we're going to sign you. Took him, had a physical. They bounced him back out because he didn't pass because he had a hip replacement. But injuries aside, what is the transactional situation like?
Well, first it starts out, we identify the player, who we want to sign. Okay. And typically it'll be, say we have a need, or we find a player, cash calls and says, listen, this guy is really, really, somebody that we should sign right now. The next step is I will call that independent league manager. Okay. I will talk to them, do a background check as much as I can from the manager, from maybe the player's former college coach, just to make sure he's not a serial killer or something. God forbid. Like I said, you got to make sure that these guys are we're bringing in our.
We had one of those on our team. I mean, we had some.
We've all
I'm sure
that.
you're aware of all the stories, but we had some very fascinating independent league stories. A guy was caught. I mean, we didn't have any serial killers. We had a guy who got, like, we were in pregame in York, Pennsylvania. It was like the end of, I think, my 2015 season. And suddenly one of our players, like, kind of walks off the field, and some cops showed up because he was mailing himself boxes of amphetamine pills.
God.
It's like, okay, did you think that was going to work out well? But obviously when, if you have an addiction, you're not thinking things through. But I'm sure you've heard all the crazy stories. But sorry, I didn't mean to.
And by the way, that's going to be another book one day when I'm out of the game, of all the crazy stories that I've seen, both affiliate and independent.
Put me on the pre-order list, because you need a quote. Just let me know.
To get some more stories. So, but after I talk to the manager, then what'll happen is I will let the manager tell the player that we're going to sign them. Okay, because that is something. And I was a former independent league manager myself. There's no greater joy than that manager who negotiated your contract with you, cultivated you, brought you in, tried to develop you, tried to be, more or less a brother or a father figure to you, being able to look you in the eye and be the first person that says, hey, listen, thanks for trusting me, because now you're going to a major league organization. Okay. Now, during that time, when he's talking to the player, I am calling the Frontier, whatever Frontier League it is, I'm calling their commissioner. And I'm negotiating with their commissioner. Now, and it's really not much of a negotiation. It's how much are you charging for the player? They give you the fee. We say, okay, fine, send me the paperwork. And then, and this does not happen a lot, but sometimes the player, won't want to go to the level where you're sending them. We've had it, a couple times, where the player's like, listen, I'm playing in the American Association. And I don't want to go to A-ball, because I've got, this great situation playing in St. Paul, or playing in Chicago, or playing. I don't want to go. And so you have to respect that and then move on and try to find somebody else. Or the player says, hey, listen, this happens 99% of the time. Hey, I'm ready. Thank you so much. And then the next part is I connect them with our player development people. We work out flights. We get them in for a physical. Now, I've only had one player over the years actually fail a physical when we got them there. And, once they fail the physical, the contract's null and void. I personally think, my personal opinion, I think most major league organizations are way too strict with their physicals when it comes to signing an independent league player. I mean, God forbid you look at, take me for a physical. I'm 45 years old, and it would be ugly if you, put me in an MRI machine right now. But most of us that played for a while, our bodies are pretty beaten up. So, we're a little more lax, I have to say, on the way that, we view it. If a player looks like he's going to tear any moment, then no, you can't, sign him. But for the most part, we give them the opportunity. We send them to that level, and, we let them have at it, and see where they go from there. And, thankfully, we've had a great track record. At the very least, that player helps us at the level that we put him at to win. And that's a success. The only time we look at an independent league player not being a success is when he goes to that level we put him at and he doesn't succeed. And thankfully, most of the time they do.
Yeah. So one thing you kind of touched on earlier about being misfits, and I can't remember who I was talking to about this, but one thing you don't see much in independent baseball is undrafted players from really high college baseball conferences. Why do you feel like that's the case?
Because I think what we talked about before is that these college coaches at these higher levels say, you don't want to go there. You didn't get drafted. Just, go get a job, go do that, which is horrible advice. Okay. It's terrible advice. Yeah. And, you don't see enough players at the highest level giving it a shot because they feel, hey, listen, I already played in the College World Series and played in front of, 20,000 people. Why am I going to go to an independent league and try to, survive now? So at the end of the day, I think that's the main reason that they don't end up giving it a fair shake. And they should. I think it's a mistake on their part. I really do.
Yeah, I mean, my experience was that most guys were good players from sort of like overlooked conferences, like small. Like I was a small Division 1. Bobby was more of like a mid-major, but he was drafted by the Orioles. Obviously, spent time in affiliated first. But a lot of guys who were undrafted, never got a shot in affiliated ball, were from a D2 school you never heard of or a NAIA school, but they were good players, and they were like, I never got that, 2, 3, 4, 5,000 fan in the stands experience, and I want that, and I believe in myself, and I'm willing to like give me a shot. Like, let's go. So it seems like that's more the attitude of independent ball. And then obviously there's the guys recirculating coming from affiliated ball.
Yeah, well, and I'm going to tell you this is that, and I've seen it, and there is one common denominator that, that you see in every player that gets out. Okay. And I'll say 99%, including the two gentlemen on the phone with me right now. Okay. You've got to be a little pissed off at the world. Okay. You got to be just a little bit slighted. You got to feel like you did, everything you should have. You got to feel like you did everything you did to get signed and you still didn't. And I hate to put it this way, but those guys that feel like they got screwed a little bit and are able to channel that into, hey, I'm going to prove everybody wrong and I'm going to prove me right. Those are the guys that make it, man. They are. They're the guys that make it. I walk into a major league stadium to scout the Yankees, and at 45 years old, I haven't played in so long, I still feel like I got screwed. And let me tell you, I didn't get screwed. I was terrible, like I said before. But at the same time, is having that chip on your shoulder and being able to channel it into something that's productive, man, those are the guys I look for. I love that. I love that the guy that's they're not complaining and saying, hey, I'm here because I got screwed and I blame them. No, it's like, I'm going to prove you wrong, and I'm going to prove me right, and those are the guys that make it.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and to Dan's point about you see a lot you don't see as many big school guys. Like you don't see the ACC kid. You see a lot of the smaller school, wherever conference they were in. I think a lot of it too, and you could probably speak to it as being a former independent manager, is if you're looking at two guys and you've got the guy from the SEC school that hit 280, playing third base, and you got the guy from the, maybe let's say Division II school who hit 370 with, however many home runs, like a lot of success. Like success matters. And like you said, there's guys that have success, that have proven success, are going to get shots, that maybe they were overlooked at where they were at. But when you're putting together an independent league team, kind of how I said before, like you're trying to win. So I'm going to take if I were putting the team together, like the kid who has eye-popping numbers, regardless of the college, I'm going to look at him and I'm going to give him a shot. And, there's not to say that Division II kid isn't just as talented as the SEC player. It's, a lot of it is circumstance when you go to college, and people choose where they want to go to college essentially. So it's not like, maybe that kid could have went to SEC school and he chose to stay closer to home, or, there's talent everywhere in baseball. I just don't think, people realize that you need to have success in independent ball. Like the managers do essentially get paid to win. So they're going to take winning baseball players. And I think a lot of these smaller school guys are winning baseball players.
And you know what those smaller school guys have a leg up on is a lot of times they played for 4 years, okay? Whereas at the SEC school, a lot of those guys had to sit for 2 and then only play 2, okay? Yeah. And we talked about it before that, in order to get better, you got to play. You got to play. And those guys that come from a Division II school or even Division III school sometimes, or a lower level Division I school, they normally played for 4 years. They normally had success, and they normally were able to know who they are as a player and be able to apply that in a game situation. So I'm a big proponent of getting those lower level college guys, getting them in, and they're end up being winning players for sure.
Yeah. So you said your job has transitioned a little bit now. So tell me about your kind of new role with the Dbacks and how that's changed.
Yeah. So, over the past, I've been with the Diamondbacks almost 12 years now. But over the past, 7, 8 years now, my job has become more of trying to identify either minor league talent for us to trade for, or major league talent for us to trade for, or free agent signings and all that. So, I'm sorry, my dog is barking behind us.
She's probably found a scorpion. You got to go see it.
Yeah. They're out here running around having a good time. But no, at the end of the day, my job now is mainly, geared towards helping to shape our major league team and helping to find those holes that we have and fill them. And, listen, I'll do anything. On any given day, I could be in a major league ballpark. I could be in a Mexican league ballpark. I could be in an independent league ballpark. I bounce around quite a bit. I'm blessed that the organization has enough faith in me that, normally when we're going to make a trade or a move, I'll be one of the guys that goes in there and sees that player and makes a determination on whether I want him or not. And, that's what it's all about. It's trying to fill those voids, find those pieces of the puzzle that can make your major league team better or even your minor league system better. And that's what, that's what it's all about.
Yeah. So I'm sure Bob's our quirky question kind of guy for the show, but I know I've got a couple, and this one's not a quirky one, but there was a lot of hoopla about nets, and there was a lot of outrage about putting nets on the ballparks. What's your opinion of putting nets on ballparks? How much should we put on? Did they put on enough? You've seen a lot of minor league games, and you've been to a lot of ballparks where there might be very little netting and all that. I mean, can you share some stories? I'm sure you got some, and what's your stance on nets?
Yeah, I'm all for the nets they put up. Okay, and I will tell you this is that I don't think you should go to a ballpark and risk your life. And that was always my feeling, and I as a minor league manager or an independent league manager back in the day, I would always worry about my wife and young children
You put them behind the net, didn't you?
Yeah, it scared the heck out of me, so I always made sure they were behind. So I think in the minor league ballparks I've seen and the major league ballparks I've seen, I think, for the most part, the netting is getting much, much better. Okay, it is. As scouts, we look through the net all the time and it doesn't bother us. So I always feel like, why should it necessarily bother the fans? Now, I don't necessarily think there should be netting over the outfield wall. You know what I mean? Let there's enough time and distance to move and all that stuff. And, you kind of know what you're getting into if you're out there as well, too. But I am all for the netting out in ballparks. I really am, because it's just, again, I don't want to see somebody go to a ballpark and risk their life. Because the ball comes off these guys' bats so hard, so fast. You can't get out of the way. And I've had this conversation with a lot of my scouting friends and baseball friends. Some of them can't stand it. Some of them think it's, ridiculous and,
really?
Should be able to, get out of the way and all that. But listen, when you've got a mother holding a baby, and that's the only seat they can say afford, that's down the line, you can't punish them for that.
That's a strange opinion. Yeah. What do you got, Bob?
Baseball is weird because the people that love baseball, I feel like, love the whole experience of baseball. Maybe you get to catch a foul ball. These are the guys
in your forehead. Yeah.
Right, well,
catch it because it dented my forehead.
You catch it. If you're good enough, you catch it in your beer. But you got the guys that are just the people in general that love getting to the park early, and if they let you in, watch batting practice. I mean, baseball is like it's like America's pastime. People love it. Like, they love the whole ambiance, the outdoors. You're in the sunshine. Like, day games are nostalgic for a lot of people. I don't know. I'm not against the netting. I understand. I could see where.
Bobby, where would you sit Jenny Rizzo in the stands if she's coming to a game? Where are you gonna leave tickets for, Bob?
You leave.
You gonna put her behind the dugout? You gonna put her behind the dugout, or you gonna put her behind the net where she's safe?
You always put family behind the net.
So it's good enough for you, but the other fans should be exposed. Is that what you're saying? I just want to be clear.
Well, there's some people I would put first row behind the dugout with no net. I mean, that's just beyond.
I know a few people like that too. Yes, I can agree.
But it's just nostalgic. Baseball's nostalgic. You don't want to, like, people were up in arms when they redid Wrigley Field, and it's like, look, they're redoing the place so it doesn't fall down on your head. Like, relax. It's the same ballpark, and people just lost their mind.
So it sounds like you're for netting.
I don't mind netting. I'm sitting at the bar across the street watching the game on TV. So I don't know if it really matters what I think about the netting.
Well, it's funny you mentioned the beer. I was in Fargo, and it was one of my first. Chris, you know how close Fargo is. Very close to It was one of my first games there, and it was like early in the game. And there's this girl, and as a player, you don't know. Like, you're just. As a pitcher, you're just like on the rail, just looking around between pitches, whatever. For whatever reason, I'm like watching this girl with this like big beer, probably like a 32-ounce beer, just like walk into her seat, like 2 or 3 rows behind the dugout. And our hitter, I can almost remember his name, sprays a line drive, just really late on the ball. And she's just like, shuffling through, excuse me. And suddenly her beer just explodes like a 9 foot, and she's looking down, getting through people, but it just hit it square in the center of her huge beer and just geyser. It was incredible. Nice. No one got hurt. She was just like, what just happened? It was,
thank God she's okay.
It was amazing. You know, I mean, it was a bullet. It was a bullet. It was like 110 miles per hour. That's why when people, like you said, some of your scout friends, when they give that argument, like, oh, you should be a guy of the way, you can't possibly have your eyeballs on the bat and the ball every moment of the game. And if it just only takes one, I mean, it's 270 pitches in a game on average between both teams. I mean, so many foul balls.
At any time. You're right.
Anytime.
Yeah, it's
you know, even as someone who's engaged in the game, you know, you're very closely watching. You look over, that could be it.
Yep, that could be absolutely. It could be it. You're right, 100% right.
So Chris, I've got a question from a buddy of mine on Twitter. He wants to know, what do you think the percentage of guys who did the crossword puzzle at their locker actually knew the answers? And he goes
0.
He goes USA Today's. I mean, this is bringing back memories. USA Today crossword puzzle all over the locker room, a half dozen of them.
That and peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and, you know, everything else in there. But yeah, most of those guys had no idea the answers. They were just trying to look smart.
You keep it in your locker the whole week, same one
the whole week, or you bring it on the road with you just to make it look like you did it. You know? So just, I've seen those guys too, and you know, we joke about that as well because we have scouts that do the same thing. So even in the stands,
USA
Chris,
Today.
Yeah. Yep. Those are hard, dude. They're hard.
They were.
I think I'm kind of smart, but I'm not good at crosswords, and I just don't even want to do them. They're hard.
I'm horrible at them as well, so I'm with you.
Chris, where do you fall on peanut butter and jelly? So one of my big things, and I'll sometimes put this in like an internet online dating profile. I'll sometimes put it in my Tinder or something and ask people, because it helps me sort out the people that I don't want in my life. What is the standard peanut butter and jelly? What flavor of jelly? And is it crunchy or creamy peanut butter?
You know, I have to say this is, you know, I like any peanut butter and jelly sandwich because it brings me back to having nothing, to sitting in a locker room, being so hungry and having $4 in my pocket and saying, if I eat the minor league steak sandwich right now, I'm going to be able to have, you know, money for later for a beer or two, you know? So, I mean, I'll take it creamy. I'll take it crunchy. I'll take grape jelly. I'll take strawberry jelly.
But if it's your last one of your whole life, what's it going to be?
Oh, if the last one of my whole life, it's going to be Wonder Bread. Okay. It's going to be, crunchy. Okay. And it's going to be grape jelly. It's going to be really how
my man.
You know?
Good job.
So and that's what I remember from it. But, you know, again, I make myself a peanut butter and jelly sandwich every once in a while when I'm feeling down. You know what I mean? It perks me back up because it brings me back to a time where life was much simpler and life was much more about, you know, the day than it was about, you know, the accomplishment, you know. And so I think the world of it.
Well, then it also brings you to the realization that you're not broke.
Thank God. Yes, thank God. Those things those are not fun. Yes.
You guys are missing the slam dunk of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and then you toast the bread just ever so slightly. You got to toast the bread. One, because you need a little texture difference, and two, because you don't know how old that bread is.
Well, also, yeah, you're absolutely right about that. But also, I always felt like the locker rooms that actually had a working toaster, that was like big league for us.
It's a luxury. That's a luxury for sure.
And by the way, normally the toaster is like 10 feet from the toilet. You know what I mean? You can imagine the bacteria that's on that.
Which is why you got to nuke the bread. You have to get all options considered. You even
which is a great segue into Bobby. Did you inject any sanitizer into your blood this morning? A la our president's recommendations.
Yeah. So Dan
any UV light into your organs?
I've got my spotlight on me, and I feel like I'm not gonna catch anything under these bright lights.
Mm-hmm.
But Chris is probably in the best situation with the natural sunlight where he's at.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's been less hit here, and I don't know enough about it to know how much heat makes a difference. But I will tell you, I think we all have a leg up on any virus just being in a locker room where the carpets, you know, has mold and 30 years old, and it hasn't been cleaned in a while. I think we're all probably immune to a lot of things other people get pretty quickly. You know?
Oh yeah,
this is true. Sleeping, I slept in a clubhouse in Camden's clubhouse for 2 weeks, something like that.
Yep.
Slept in the in the training room where I could close the door and it'd be dark, but there had to be just untold molds and mildews that I was inhaling. And
not in
I lived in the locker room when I managed the Brockton Rocks in the Can-Am League. I lived in the locker room there all summer long as a manager. And I'll tell you why is because I couldn't find any short-term housing. And I lived in the ballpark anyway, and, you know, literally and figuratively. And so I figured, why not just stay here? When my family comes to the town, I'll get a hotel. And we were at the Residence Inn when they came to town. But otherwise, I slept on the couch in there. And it was actually therapeutic, you know, to be able to, you know, just wake up, make out your lineup, be available for the players. And, you know, if they wanted some extra BP or whatever. And, you know, I look back on that now and be like, I lived in a damn clubhouse. It was amazing, you know?
Yeah, my favorite was when we had a manager that did that. And I don't know if he lived there, but he definitely slept there. And he stole one of the do not disturb signs from one of the hotels to put on his office door. So you knew if he was sleeping or not, or if he went golfing early and came back for a nap.
I love it. Hey, Butch Hobson would come in and wake me up sometimes. You know what I mean? If we were on if he was playing us when he was managing Nashua, and he'd come in and wake me up at 7:00 in the morning and say, "Let's go get breakfast." You know. So
well, that's funny you mentioned Butch because he coaches the team that I help with in Chicago, and I love Butch. Butch is great. Butch is like the prototypical, you know, indie ball like manager. Like he was made for this type of baseball.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, managing against him was a treat, and, you know, getting to hang out with him is always a treat. So many stories, so much experience, so much care. You know, he was a manager for us for A-ball club a few years back, did a great job. But again, you know, going to independent league baseball as a manager is so much fun. Building your own teams, being able to, you know, essentially hire and fire who you want. And it's all about winning, and it's all on you. It was some of the most fun I've ever had. I always say at the end of my career, I want to go back one more year when I'm in my 60s or 70s and do it one more time. I tell Pete and Caviglia that all the time. You know, we talk every few days, and, you know, to me, that would be the most fun, to go back and just try to strap it on one more time and try to win at a level that I have so much respect for.
Yeah, it feels very pure at the indie ball level.
It's funny. I don't know Butch Hobson. I never played for him. I only know I have one story, which, and it's by no means is like I'm just gonna tell it, but it was the All-Star game of 2015. So he was the manager for, I don't think my side, but the other side. And so in like a, you know, pre-game banquet or the previous day, so Ric Flair was like the celebrity that they brought in to, you know, like just be a headliner and like
that was in Bridgeport,
the banquet. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I was there.
So you remember this then?
Yeah.
So Bush was up there giving a talk, you know, like his little 5-10 minute spiel or whatever. And people were all excited because Ric Flair's here kept getting mentioned, and people were going, woo, like from the stands. And people were doing that while Butch was giving his talk. And he was like, hey, you need to stop. And then, of course, like, didn't know that he was like actually serious. People kept doing it like casually, like, woo. And he's like, no. And it got awkward because he basically started yelling at people, and the whole room got quiet. And it's like, oh God, he's about to fight us. And he's about to fight the All-Star attendees in the stand. That was amazing.
I remember somebody telling him after the fact about that, and being like, I had no idea. Ric Flair was awesome that day too.
He's the best. He's got so many. I mean, he's been on ESPN a couple times coaching the Dogs, just getting tossed. It's like the theatrics of it is just he's as old school baseball as it comes. I feel like he could still strap it on if he really needed to and play.
Oh, absolutely. He's all tatted up now and everything else. He can get out there and do what he needs to do. I always say this: if I'm in a fight and I need two independent league managers, it's Incaviglia and him. You know, so I want those guys, you know, watching my back. So, but
you got to make sure it's in season, because once he goes back home for the off season, he can't get in touch with him. He's only fishing and hunting.
That's it. Yeah,
no cell phone.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, so. I know you probably, you know, working for a major league team, you probably can't forecast too much, but like, what do you see kind of coming from all this stuff? I mean, obviously there's like the minor leagues, they're cutting some teams, you know, some of the independent leagues are reorganizing already. You know, there's always like a minor or a independent league that's kind of shaky financially. I think all the main ones like the Frontier, American Association, Atlantic League, those are all pretty stable, but like the Pecos League, which is kind of like another tier below, is always pretty unstable. But I mean, what do you see happening post coronavirus, or what do you got going forward?
So from an independent league standpoint, I think, as always, it'll be survival of the fittest. Those guys that have the deepest pockets to survive will survive. Those that don't will go away. And those that stay will probably thrive in this new baseball world where, like we said before, less affiliates, less rounds of the draft, and more. And even the price for the player that we purchase will probably go up some. They're going to have to get through this year, which is obviously going to be very difficult. And I've heard, in talking, and nobody knows yet what's going to happen. I do believe this. I do believe there's going to be a major league season. I do believe there's going to be some form of a major league season. Whether there'll be an MILB season, a minor league season, I don't know. And what that looks like this year, again, I don't know. But I do think we as baseball people are kind of taking it upon ourselves when it's safe, and it has to be safe, to do this not only for ourselves, but also people need this. I mean, I have to say, I've never watched an NFL football game in my life. I'm sure it's great. I'm just not a football guy.
I'm not either.
Baseball is America, as apple pie and everything else. This country needs some form of baseball, and it needs it for their souls. And we've got to figure out a way to play it, whether it's no fans, whether it's a few fans, whatever we got to do, we got to figure out a way to play some semblance of a season. And I think Rob Manfred and I think everybody in between will make that happen in some form or another. And again, when it comes to the independent leagues, I think they believe the same thing. I think they believe that they have to do it, whether it's even in the fall or late summer, some form of a season. Even if it's 50 games, it's something. And it gets it going, and we'll be there, okay, scouting those games. I can assure you of that. And, and again, video becomes more important now because, you're going to have to look at a lot of videotape and a lot of things on players to be able to kind of connect the dots. So the world is really changing. People have asked me, what I've spent my time doing during this pandemic and all this. But, I'm up at 4 or 5 in the morning every day, working on looking at video of players that I may not get that many looks at this season who may be good fits for us down the road, whether that be independent, big league, minor league. I'm watching video. I'm working on my Spanish. I always wanted to be more fluent than I am in Spanish. So I'm taking time to get better. And, I say this to players all the time. I hope you're not just sitting on your butts, okay? Because if you are, you're going to be left in the dust. This is your time to pick up your market share, to get your butt out of bed, to get going and focus. And when you finally get the opportunity to get out there, make it happen, and I hope players are doing that. And I'm sure some will and some won't, the way it works. But, this is an important time, and nobody really knows what the future is going to hold.
Yeah, the American Association just put out that they're planning on starting their season early July. So what I took it as is, 4th of July is always a huge day for baseball. Like that's going to try and be their opening day. But I was telling, guys the other day that this is, if there was ever opportunity for independent baseball to make the next step into the mainstream or into people's consciousness, like this is the year to do it. They have no obligation to TV rights. They have no obligation to, to a strict timeline. Like if they can start in September, then it start in September, run the season. Like you have a chance to corner the baseball world, because Major League Baseball has so many other factors they have to consider. And most importantly, like the players' health. You can't roll these guys out there, 1 week coming out of their house after quarantine and say, here we go, let me see 95. But for independent ball, I mean, there's these spring trainings for these guys are 2 weeks tops. So it fits the model of independent baseball. And if you can get any semblance of a season, even if you run it through Halloween, would they have to do it? I feel like it's a must for just the brand that is independent baseball.
Well, and again, picking up your market share now, I mean, it took a pandemic to be able to kind of put the independent leagues almost having a leg up right now on everybody else because of everything you just said. You don't have the restrictions. You don't have the player restrictions that, would hinder them from not getting ready in a hurry. I hope independent baseball takes this and runs with it and looks at it as a platform to be able to really show what they have. Because, in essence, if Major League Baseball, say, is not playing right now, or then, you could get independent league. ESPN would put independent league games on TV. They would more. I mean, I know the Atlantic League has games already, on the it was ESPN2 or something like that. But I think the other leagues could do the same thing, and stream them. Do what you have to do to be able to get the American people that maybe don't know about you, and maybe maybe it goes national as well too, which would be really cool. See people in Europe watching independent baseball, would be a lot of fun as well too. So I'm all for independent league stepping up right now.
Well, I've heard the Atlantic League is going to roll out a new rule change where pitchers have to throw every other pitch from different arms, and then they can't wear shoes. So, can you comment on that?
I have not heard that. So that would be interesting. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, you've seen a lot. Obviously, you understand independent baseball better than anyone. And the Atlantic League has done a lot of quirky things in the last couple of years that I personally, there's a number of them that I was personally pretty unhappy about. Just knowing that the players themselves, I know I put myself in their shoes. Like, how would I feel about this, having to pitch from 63 feet, 6 inches, or the fact that you can't pick off the first base, or the stealing rule. And I think there were a lot of, I just wonder how well thought out some of those were. And I know there's a lot of things at play, many that I'm not privy to, like financially or whatever things are happening. But what, and I know you have a relationship with all these leagues. So, but where do you fall on some of these rule changes? Are they good for the sport? Or some of them bad for the sport?
And again, let me say this, and I voiced this opinion to the commissioners myself as well too. It's not that I don't or that I'm against fiddling with the game a little bit or trying something new. My biggest issue is trying to do all those things at once and putting the players at a real disadvantage in trying to showcase themselves. Moving the mound back, I was against from day one. Okay. But I have to say is that, the mound visits by a manager, I was okay with that one. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That if you came out, you had to change your pitcher, or even a pitcher has to face 3 batters. That kind of thing I'm not necessarily against. But again, I'll say this. I was against rolling it out all at once. I don't mind them saying like, hey, listen, half the season, we're going to try these 2 things. In the second half, we're going to try these 2 things. But again, you can't move the mound back. Okay. I have to say, I did like the idea of the bases because I've seen so many players get hurt on the bases, but they had those flat bases that they utilized where almost like a softball base a little bit more, where your heel wouldn't get jammed and all that stuff. I don't mind those things, but when you mess with the sanctity of the game, again, moving the mound back, things like that upsets me. And I was against that part of it. And I know a lot of the managers were too as well, but they couldn't say a lot. But again, independent baseball has to, kind of develop a relationship and cultivate that relationship with Major League Baseball. And in order to do that, sometimes they have to be the guinea pig. And they were in this case. And, I don't know how much going forward they're going to do it all at once, because I think they did listen to some people like me and others who said it. Roll things out little at a time in small increments. That way you don't put the player at a disadvantage. Because let's face it, when you're hurting players, you're doing bad for the game. And I know players that didn't necessarily want to go to the Atlantic League because of some of the rules that were in place, and they went other places.
Yeah, some of those rules were extreme. The 62-foot mound was the most baffling one to me, just from a logistical standpoint of let's cut the mound out and move it. But it's not just like that rule affects every single level of baseball all the way down to like 8th grade. Once you start playing on a major league field, I mean, there's hundreds of baseball fields in my area in Chicago. Who's paying for these mounds to be moved back 2 feet? And who like, I'm ready to start a landscaping business because I'm going to build some of these mounds and make a killing. It's just
Bobby's Clay. Get Bobby's Clay for your new 62-foot mound.
You see a lot of rules, so like the rule changes, and the big ones are the no contact rules. I was a middle guy, and my favorite part about being on first base, aside from maybe getting the steal, was breaking up a double play. Like that was like the glory, like the hallowed ground. Like, oh yeah,
Bobby wants to spike his competition, and he wants all the fans to get hit by foul balls. But it's just a bloodbath.
But when you watch old games, like the best highlights are the ones where there is a little bit of contact. Like I want that. We had Jeff Fry on Monday, and he talks about
he'd spike you in a hurry.
Oh, he'd spike me, and he'd spike me off the field. But we were talking about being in the batter's box, and what guys that teach hitting don't understand is that little bit of fear that you have when a guy is throwing hard and playing the game. You know, if you're a catcher, that little bit of fear of catching the ball from the outfield is that you might get smoked. And when you're playing shortstop, it's okay. This guy got a running start on a slow roller to the second baseman. Like, I might get thrown in the left field. I miss those rules. Like I
agree.
It's like code, you know, it's taking the edge out of baseball. I think with some of those, I understand the protection and Posey is the big reason that they took the contact rule out of home plate. And, you know, whenever you have a major superstar get hurt, everyone's going to be up in arms. Like, how do we not have this guy, you know, playing in the most important games? But at the same time, it's like, hey, this is like hard-nosed baseball. Like, people back when Pete Rose played loved Charlie Hustle. Like, they love like running the guy over in the All-Star game. People love watching that, and I would like to see more of it. And you know, some of those rule changes, I guess maybe I fall in a minority category there.
No, I'm with you guys on that. I like the contact. You know, I really do. I always have. I certainly don't want to see players get hurt. I certainly don't want to see their careers shortened in any way. But one of my favorite things as a middle infielder myself was when a guy was barreling down on you and, you know, dropping down your arm slot and, you know, throwing it at his forehead to get him down, you know. And, you know, you don't do that anymore. Now guys just camp out, you know, and they just, you know, they take their time and they make their throws. And, you know, listen, in some ways the game has gotten worse. In some ways it's gotten better. And, you know, I am a big advocate of a little contact and a little fear. And, you know, when you're barreling down on a catcher and, you know, I think it makes everybody better personally, you know, when you have that little bit of fear and a little, it makes technique more important as well, too.
Yeah. It takes away some of the policing of the game too. You know, guys, I'm not saying that you need to throw at guys or that it's right all the time, but, you know, you take out my shortstop, like that guy comes up the next time, like he's probably going to wear one in the back. And it's just, okay. Usually.
Yeah. Like the Astros, they should wear every pitch in the back, you know,
well,
like
now you're talking. That would be more dangerous than policing. You know, that's extreme policing.
I think they're going to probably wear a few in the back, I'm sure, you know, the way that it's going, you know, but, you know, let's face it, you talk to some of the younger players now and they don't even understand that, you know, guys used to, you know, what chin music means. No, and, you know, they think if they got knocked down, it was just because the pitcher had bad mechanics or, you know, had bad command or control. But, you know, they don't understand that was a vehicle of intimidation and of strategy. And it's something that, you know, listen, I'm never going to tell a pitcher as a manager to throw at anybody's head or hurt anybody, but I certainly have told them, hey, listen, you know, get inside on this guy, knock him down. You know, if you hit him, you hit him, you know, and you know, that was life back in the days. You know, now it's like, oh my God. You know, so.
Chris, you say back in the day, it's dating yourself.
Yeah. Well, you know, unfortunately, from the time, so my last year of managing was 2009. The game has changed a lot, you know, in say 10, 11 years. It really has, you know, I mean, some of the things we did back then, you would, you know, for instance, you know, after a game, you know, we would sit and have a beer and everybody would kind of hang out and, you know, talk, and the older players would have a conversation with the younger players and I would talk to them and all that stuff. You know, in our minor league clubhouses, there are no alcoholic beverages allowed anymore at the minor league level. And there are none of that stuff. And I'm not advocating drinking, and I'm certainly not advocating getting, you know, lit up like a Christmas tree, you know, every night. But at the same time is, you know, it has its place to be able to sit around, have a conversation, talk to one another, you know, over a cold beverage. But
there used to be kegs in the
absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, listen, at the end of a series, I remember Butch Hobson and I, you know, I would send a few cases of beer down to him, or he would send them down to me, and, you know, we would have a conversation about it. We were always looking out for each other, but you don't do that stuff anymore. It's different.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's, I guess there's liability, but you're right. It's culturally changed. Now after the game, you get your smoothie and you get your energy beverage for the next day. You go do your, I don't know, kids these days, they don't know what they're doing.
Hit the hot tub.
Well, and that's something like I went through that evolution as a player. Like for me, I was the guy in college who just never had a day off from a workout. I ate the healthiest food all the time. I was like crushing fruits and vegetables. And then like, in pro ball, you start to realize over time, it's like I can have a beer or two and still be 100% tomorrow. And I can enjoy my teammates a little more. And I can like go out once in a while, and you just realize, because at the end of the day, that's the stuff you miss and that you really cherish. And if you're always just like, I got to be home and get to bed as soon as possible, so I'm perfect for the next day, it's like it's just like you didn't stop and smell the roses. And what's really a special overall experience, it's not special just because of how, you know, you had all your tools at 100% the next day. You can still be 98% and be just as good.
Dan, those
Unique like
beers are the reason you were 100% the next day. You got to mellow, bring yourself down.
Yeah, Chris, do you
mellow out.
do you have a chart for the sixth tool in your on the 20 to 80 scale?
Absolutely, yes. They got to be able to handle, being able to go if unless somebody has a problem. And I'm not advocating, certainly not advocating somebody
for sure.
drinking to excess. But at the same time, it's nice to see a player be able to go out, have a beer, have a conversation, talk about the game. I mean, we do that as scouts, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you don't necessarily even have to have a beer. You can just go out and enjoy your teammates or people in the industry and learn something. I mean, we're learning that way,
Got to have a personality to play this game.
Absolutely. No doubt.
Chris, are you a Wawa or a Sheets guy? Be
Wawa
careful.
for
Be
sure.
careful.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All
I
right.
love Wawa.
You're
Yeah,
smart.
no doubt. Love Wawa.
Saved my life on the road. I mean, those are those things too, where like I can't tell you how many meals I ate either at Wegmans in New Jersey, that amazing grocery store. You can get a legit healthy meal for $6, or Wawa, and I get my chicken cheesesteak with Old Bay and buffalo sauce and spinach, and get a pretzel.
That for sure. When I managed the Atlantic City Surf, I had I was at Wawa every day, so I loved being down there.
Well, you had some other temptations to deal with when you're playing in Atlantic City, other than where you're eating. I explained. So I'm from Chicago, so we don't have Wawa or Sheets. There's when I tell people like, hey, you can go to the gas station and get a sandwich made.
They don't get it.
Not only do they not get it, like even the first time I saw a Wawa or a Sheets, I go, why the hell would I eat at a gas station? Like, I don't eat at the Subway at the gas station or truck stop. I'm not getting a sandwich made by the guy who's also just came out of the back, as he was digging his hands into the,
oh, your brakes are done.
Yeah, their brakes.
What do you want?
Like, oh, how's the salami today? That's greasy.
So true. So true. And I've had some of the best meals. They're like gourmet meals at some of these places.
Seriously, it's better than, it's like a home cooked meal at a gas station, and that people don't understand that. Like, you can do your shopping at a Sheets.
Absolutely. And I have, yes, my weekly shopping. I've bought clothes, I've bought hats, gloves, anything you need,
It's par for the course. Like, hey, you ask the manager when you get on the bus, like, hey, are we going to stop at a Wawa?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I always just say to them, where do you guys want to stop? And they'd say, hey, let's, 2 hours down the line, stop at Sheets, so stop at Wawa.
Yeah.
No doubt.
Well, and it's weird. It doesn't have like a name for it, because it's not just a gas, like you wouldn't call it a gas station. Like, that doesn't adequately describe it, but it's also not really like a convenience store. Like, I don't feel like is there a term that's really?
It's like a modified truck stop.
I have friends that would call it a gasateria. Kind of like a gas station cafeteria kind of thing. That's what they would call it.
It sounds so unappetizing.
It does.
That's crazy. Yeah, I mean, with the whole coronavirus thing going on, it's just, there's just so much uncertainty, and you see it trickling down to the younger players. And I guess the question is, what do players need to be doing now? Because you said, hopefully you're making good use of your time, and scouts are making good use of their time. Everyone's trying to make good use of your time. But what is a parent, and I know you don't live as much in like the youth baseball world, like that's not your world, but at the same time, you have kids, like you grew up in baseball, knowing where the game's been going and how players are changing now. And I'm sure a lot of the stuff that's happening, and we've been talking about hitting Twitter and everyone's fighting each other about, you got to swing this way, you got to swing that way. Lots of changing, and a lot of stuff that's happening today is probably going to be fleshed out and flushed out in a couple of years. But what advice would you give to a parent who's got, say, a good 13-year-old, and he wants to teach them the right way?
Well, I'm going to say this. The first thing a player should be doing right now, and parents should be helping the players do right now, is to remain positive, okay? You've got to remain positive in this whole thing, because, if people are going to look at the glass half empty, it's a pretty bleak world right now. The other thing, and I try to remind everybody right now, is baseball is not just a game, it's a therapy, okay? It's something that when it's not in our lives, we're unhappy, we're depressed. And we need to use that as a vehicle to make ourselves have some joy. And through practice and through anything they could be doing right now. Listen, if you're at home right now, even if it's push-ups, sit-ups, and throwing a ball against the wall, it is so important right now, not only for your physical skill set, but for your mental sanctity.
And I worry more about the mental side for these young players right now than anything. And I'm not certainly not calling them soft, because the kids these days, I have 3 girls. They've had to live through things, that we didn't even fathom back in the day. Wouldn't have. If you told me there was a pandemic, I wouldn't even have known what that would have been like. So, I think they're having to live through a much different world than we had to live through necessarily. And I think remaining positive, learning how to utilize time and keep your mind off the negative is the most important lesson in all this. And the other lesson in all this is, we as baseball people, we're gone a lot from our families. So how about taking this time to eat meals together, to hang out, to tell the people that are around you that you love them and how important they are. I think 99% of the positive that's going to come out of this from a baseball standpoint is how we utilize baseball as an individual and as a country, as a conduit to bringing joy back to our own lives, and let that vehicle bring us back to a time that, we're going to get there, where baseball's being played, popcorn's being eaten, hot dogs are being eaten. We're going to have our peanut butter and jelly sandwiches again. And, we're going to get back to some form of normality. And, and again, I think that's the important thing for the parents right now. But I also think what a great time for a player to learn something new, okay? And let's say a player struggles with their backhand, okay? There's a million YouTube videos out there with 20 different ideas on how to do it. Watch them all. Try them all. See what works for you. What works for one person doesn't always work for another person, or vice versa. So, take this time and use it wisely is my recommendation.
Yeah. Bobby, what have you been telling your parents to your academy?
I actually just sent out an email this morning because I had some good news to tell everybody, and we're moving facilities and we're upgrading facilities. Like, we're moving into a more conducive training facility for my youth program. So that's I got to give some good news, but I send out daily workouts through my Twitter handle for the parents, and I had parents call me yesterday and ask me, because Illinois was just informed yesterday we're going to be staying in place until May 31st. And parents are asking me, what does that mean? And as I said, I have no idea. I know about as much as Dan's putting his mask on. I'm distracted. But I know about as much as you do. I'm just taking the lead of, as much as I want to say, hey, enough's enough. We've been in the house long enough. Let's get outside. I can't override the government, the governor. I can't, the parks aren't open.
I thought you're going to be Chicago mayor, Bobby. You could make these decisions.
When I am the mayor of Chicago, these decisions will be mine to make. And I'll go head to head with the mayor or with the governor, but I don't have answers. And the positivity thing is the best, take some time. I know my, one of our coaches and one of my good friends is an A-ball pitching coach with the Rays, and they have to take their Spanish classes over this time. And that's, I'm on the Duolingo and doing, 15 minutes a day. They tell you, you'll learn a language, and I'm confident I'm not learning it, because I'm just not that sharp. But it's, you do something else. There's push-ups to be done. There's games to watch. You can learn something new during this time. And to your point, these baseball lifers that don't get to spend any time at home, this is uncharted territory to be in the, close to the end of April and still at your house.
Yeah, I didn't even know what the weather was like in April here, because I'm always gone. You know what I mean? So
yeah. It's nice. It's nice.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we're making the best out of it on this end and doing what we need to do to get better. And I hope everybody else is too, because like you said, there's nothing we can personally do about it right now.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Chris, I know we appreciate your time, and I don't want to keep you too long, but the one thing I wanted to know, and I wanted to, put out there for everyone is in your opinion, if you're a college senior, or if you've got maybe 1 year of affiliated ball, you got released, what's the best way in your opinion to get to independent ball? What avenues would you take if you were a player? How much contact should these guys be making? I know there's a lot of guys, and I struggled to, myself knowing what to do trying to get into independent ball. What's your best advice for a guy that wants to get into indie ball and, potentially play professional baseball?
My advice is always, from an independent league or even major league standpoint, is use the buddy system. most of us have some friend that is already in an organization, whether it be independent or affiliated, and ask them, hey, would you mention to your manager or a scout to take a look at me? And
Yeah.
to talk to me. And normally, especially if that player who's your friend is pretty good, that manager or scout will talk to you. And that's the way to get in. Utilize the buddy system. Shoot an email out. Ask, hey, can I come there and have you take a look at me? When is your next tryout? What winter league do you guys scout? So I'm going to try to get into that one. Communication is huge when it comes to getting yourself picked up. And so many guys, they sit on their butts. And, I wrote about it in my book, Sign Me, is that, you can't sit back on your heels and expect to get signed from your couch. You got to get out there and contact anybody and everybody you can in order to be able to make an in. And, I'm always happy to help. I send emails out all the time. Hey, this player contacted me. These are the reports we have on them from college. Might be worth taking a look at it. Might not, but here it is. And I put it in their hands. So communication is key. Utilizing the buddy system and just getting your name out there any way possible. And you know what? We brought up the league before. The Pecos League, as low level as it is, still gives a player an opportunity to play. And again, you're not going to get signed from your couch. So you got to get out there and you got to play and take any form of baseball you can, and independent or otherwise, and get going and get playing.
Yeah, I think guys are always nervous to reach out and touch base with people and ask for something. Yeah, ask for help. Like, hey, Chris, you're a manager of Atlantic City. What's the situation? Can I come try out? Can I get in front of you? And I think, just knowing Butch and the guys I played with in indie ball, like those guys are so receptive of people reaching out. And nobody's, I've never once seen an independent manager take a phone call or get a text message from a potential player that wanted to play for them and blow them off completely or say, F this guy, we don't need you. You're not good enough. It's like, hey, we don't need anybody right now. Stay in touch with me, or, hey, we're having an open tryout, or maybe this team is looking for somebody. Everybody knows everybody in baseball. And if you don't make contacts and you don't reach out, you never know. You should have zero shame in trying to promote yourself, at least, get in front of people.
People are a lot nicer in the game than they get credit for a lot of times. And there are a few guys over the years that are just rough and yell at players when they call. Quite honestly, that's why those guys aren't in the game anymore, and they were jerks. So the majority of people are really receptive. I get an email at least once a day, sometimes 10, 20 times a day, depending on the time of year. Hey, what would you recommend? What do you think of this? What do you think of that? I'm happy. I get back to everybody as soon as I can. I always send out emails. I always try to point them in the right direction. Sometimes I can help, sometimes I can't. But listen, we're all in this boat together, and nobody's going to yell at you for trying to better your career.
Yeah, for sure. And that's, I created a YouTube video about this. I guess it was probably a year ago. And Ryan Quigley got signed. Yep. Did you sign Ryan Quigley?
No, I did not. Nope.
But he got signed a couple times out of independent ball. We were similar players, and he was a really good advocate for himself. He hounded teams, sent tons and tons of emails. And as I looked back at my own independent career, I was like, I didn't feel comfortable doing that. It's a big regret. And I filmed this little video. I actually cut myself, and I was talking to myself on the couch. Really, it's trippy. But if I could go back and give myself advice, it's exactly what you just said, and exactly what Bobby said. Like, advocate for yourself. Don't be shy about it, because the worst thing that happens, they don't respond. They just delete the email, like whatever.
I can't wait to watch that. I'm going to watch that. That sounds,
I'll send it to you. It's trippy,
do.
but,
Please.
But Chris, thanks so much for being here today. Obviously, everyone listening, this is a really fantastic talk from a side of baseball that you don't really hear that much about. The indie leagues there's like kind of like a little bit of like the dark web of baseball, but it's not.
Like
it's good baseball, and it's great. So if there's a team near you, you should go check it out. Chris, tell us a little bit more about your book. So, Sign Me, the Undrafted Baseball Player's Guide to the Independent Leagues. Where can people find it? And what do you got for us?
Yeah, it's an easy read. It's 100 pages. It's certainly not Shakespeare, and but it's just written from the heart, and it's available on Amazon and Kindle. And it's something that is and was a labor of love for me, because I just got so sick and tired of it not getting its due. And when I wrote it, obviously I didn't know there was going to be a pandemic and all that going on, and how important now people have to know about independent league baseball.
Absolutely.
Right? They don't have any choice. They have to do it now. So, I think it's a well worthwhile read for sure. So, and that's, I'm obviously biased.
Well, if you're a college junior, you're a college senior, or you're a parent with a college baseball player, you should absolutely pick that book up because, again, you want to have the facts and you want to know if your son wants to keep playing, what their avenues might be. Like I went through it, Bobby went through it, but as we get farther out, we're a little more out of touch. We don't have the context. Like we don't know what's the current situation, but obviously Chris has been a lifer in this. So really highly recommend you giving it a chance. So pick it up on Amazon. And obviously, Chris, thanks so much again for your time. Good luck with your scorpion streak. I imagine it will be broken at some point, but I'll keep rooting for you.
It will be. And I would love to come back on again once we get going. If you guys ever want to talk.
Yeah, for sure.
Can't thank you guys enough for having me. Really appreciate it.
All right. And for you all out there watching today, thanks for being with us here live on YouTube and Twitter. And be sure to catch us on Spotify, iTunes, wherever else you listen to podcasts. And we'll see you here on the next morning brushback.
Bye, guys.
Thanks,
Yep,
Chris.
thank you, Chris.
Thanks, guys.